Imagine a vibrant discussion between people that includes both openness and critical thought in the pursuit of truth. The Purchasing Truth podcast is an experience, a journey, an exploration of the impact that negative messages in politics and the media have on our families, community, society, and nation. Join your hosts, Bill Stierle and Tom Hazard, to discover new concepts and language strategies that will reveal effective ways of establishing truth. This podcast series will tackle current events, leadership challenges, healthcare confusion, integrity in business, and many other areas that affect us all. Gain clarity and understanding of the various truth perspectives. Welcome to Purchasing Truth.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Purchasing Truth. I'm Tom Hazard, along with your host, Bill Stierle. And Bill, I'll tell you, I have some concerns.
Yes.
Which may not surprise you, that regardless of who wins this election, and by the time this airs, the election has actually happened, although I hope we know who the president is, but there's a chance we may not know. But regardless of who wins, whether it's Joe Biden or Donald Trump, I'm finding so much disinformation, so many partial truths out that are being propagated all over the place, mainstream media, social media, everything.
Correct. Yes.
I'm very concerned that we've lost our compass as a nation about even recognizing statements of truth.
Correct. Recognizing statements of truth is one of the things that is really difficult, because when something comes in and it validates a belief bias that has been, the magical word here is fossilized, a belief bias that has been codified in our consciousness for various different reasons. One is it could be true, or one is it's been a thing called propagandized true. In other words, it's been things, and this is bipartisan all the way down the line, is that if I have a belief that unions protect people, jobs, and they protect them, then I look at the police unions that are protecting police officers. Immediately, my truth has moved from the left to the right and the right to the left. It can be moved very quickly from both sides to both. It's like, well, there's problems with all these different systems that we need to allow truth to come to us. We need to work on the process of truth and lean on the evidence and the research to say, well, I've read this article. Well, what's the right saying about this? What's the left saying about this? And you and I have often discussed, when somebody tries to play the middle and tries to move back towards the center, Chris Wallace is a good example of this, and saying, wait a minute, I'm kind of a conservative guy and I kind of thought my values were over here. But now all of a sudden I'm noticing that there's this other set of folks that are now hammering me from this side, and I'm getting hammered from this side. And all I'm just trying to do is trying to stay objective here and trying to research the truth. And they go like, well, you kind of said this. Do I hold you to that, or do I not hold you to that? And all of a sudden he's getting, no, don't hold him to that. It's like, but as a news reporter, I got to hold him to what he just said. So the need for truth is really unsettling. And the process is that, how do we become both compassionate and empathetic to the things that people say, and have some, and just kind of both celebrate their experience, but also recognize that they only have a partial truth that they're working off of. And that's the way we got to start breathing into this a little bit more, is having some tolerance and some recognition that they're only working off of a partial truth.
And it seems like it's going to be very difficult to do, because whenever somebody hears some information, a statement, if they don't agree with it, so many people just so quick to throw up the comment fake news.
Yes.
Without going through any process, without doing any research to even considering, is there truth to this statement? And that's a very dangerous place for us to be. You said the fossilization of truth or fossilization of thoughts, and that must be based on beliefs. Is that right, Bill?
Right. A belief is something I don't want to rethink. I am in agreement that this is the belief about something. I don't want to rethink it. I don't have enough time in my life. I don't want to deal with the instability it would take for me to rethink and redevelop a new belief. And this is when it gets unsettling, because there's times in the life of a human being that there's no more time to rethink things. As somebody that, my parents died a couple of years ago, that towards the end of the life, they weren't rethinking things. They weren't rewriting their beliefs. They were just trying to enjoy whatever moments that they had with their kids as their memories started to fall off about their kids all the way into their passing. So, but for somebody that's a 30-year-old or a 40-year-old to be codified on a belief this early without double checking or checking in with that belief, there's a danger in democracy when you cannot have a safe conversation about differing opinions. Politicians are supposed to transition to statesmen after they get elected. That has not taken place over it's been gradually getting worse over the last 30 years. We don't have the statesmen going like, well, here's the conservative way to think about it, and here's the democratic way to think about it. What we do have political people looking for the gotcha moment to then say, hey, there's a gotcha moment. Let me give you an example. A statesman says, the numbers don't look good for Social Security. We need to move the retirement age from 65 to 75, and gets hammered because he does it, because the numbers don't look good. And people are living longer. When it was written, it was 65. And we need to move it to 75. And we could do it over a series of years because the numbers will work out. Basically, it's an insurance policy for old people. I mean, that's all Social Security is. It's an insurance policy. It's like, can we trickle money in so people don't run out of money at the end of their lives? And people are paying into a Social Security, which is an insurance policy. I mean, I wish the Democrats would start talking about that. God, this is one of the best insurances that we provide to people. It's like, oh my gosh, right? But right. They're talking about it that way. All right. So this is, again, you and I expanding flexibility. Notice how me just even calling it an insurance policy has just broadened the truth about what that function is. Here's a person that's working. The government takes some money. They put it into an insurance policy. It's called Social Security, and it pays them back later. Why? Because we need a stable elderly population. We don't need a death and dying in the streets elderly population.
Well, so it's interesting, Bill, as you talked about the statesman versus the politician and how right. Maybe it used to be and where today it seems like they're always politicians. And I think we can thank television right. and, C-SPAN and just the 24-hour news media that needs to be fed every day for a lot of this. Right. But it's now I'm realizing the word fossilization to indicate how hard it is to move people off of their beliefs.
That's right.
It's like embedded in stone. It's deep in the earth, and it's you know, there are all sorts of metaphors here, but the one that's really coming to mind right now is, you know, I'm hoping that politicians that have their beliefs so fossilized that they are not working together as statesmen might actually become dinosaurs if we can vote them out and get new people in that will actually work together.
Ooh, I really appreciate that. The narratives, because right now what's happening is that there is a funding money that goes into fossilized viewpoints of a person that says, wait a minute, I don't want the money that I would like to go to my kids or grandkids or great grandkids or great 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 grandkids. I don't want the government to take that money because it's my money. What they really need to be saying is, how do I build the internal characters of my sibling, of my child, of my family, so that they can cultivate and move the process of wealth from generation to generation on their own. Whether the government has the money or not, that's irrelevant because they have the mindset to generate their own money. Very, very valuable to talk about an open process between what really a balance of some social elements that are taking place inside society and some capitalist elements that take place in society, and how they can work off each other to collaborate and cooperate, not one versus other. This is better than this. This is better than this. And capitalism can outmarket socialism easy because socialism is a collective piece. So the marketing and the branding and the hammering that socialist ideas have taken a hammering on is been extraordinary. The easiest way to do it is that if it's for the good of society, you want it to be dealt with in the good of society as a social service that kind of, you don't want this to be done as a capitalist way, because if it is done in a capitalist way, it causes all other kinds of problems. Prisons are a great example of that. Great example, because you get to keep building prisons, because if you're doing it as a capitalist marketplace, then all of a sudden you're just looking for any small reason, true story, to lock up somebody because they broke some rule that we have written so it helps put more people in jail. And now all of a sudden you've got these two systems not really working in a healthy way with each other. So we really want to make sure that we're using language and things more in a collaborative, cooperative way to reduce the impact of the partial truth, the repeated lie, the messages that are being promoted as a form of distraction. Because, last episode, we talked about the hypnotism part of it, is that as soon as you hear a message over and over again and it fossilizes it, all it does is it just pours more cement on the fossil. And then you got to dig it out under another 100 feet of rock. It's like, that's not helpful.
It's very hard to do. And this is my concern going forward in America after this election is people do not speak with each other in the right ways.
Right.
To have you might call it a healthy conversation, a reasonable conversation, a empathetic conversation. I don't know what the right path here is, but
no, you're right. The empathetic conversation. You and I have been in pre-COVID in settings and group discussions where there might be one or two people that are more from the conservative mindset, and they would start down a narrative of, hey, I really like these things about Trump. I really like these things about Republicans. I really like these things about ... And you watched me turn on a dime and go like, oh, so I hear that you really like the stability and the consistency of the value that self-determination makes as a part of the Republican Party. Yes. Now I'm empathizing with him. I'm going like, not self-determination when, 1/3 of the population is living below below a line of a living wage. That doesn't, you're not even giving them a shot at self-determination. They can't even dig themselves out because they're scrapping it on trying to meet a house payment and put food on the table and then sacrifice medicine because that happens to be the third thing on the list and there's just not enough money to get there. Well, that's not allowing self-determination to take place, which is really where the honest discussion needs to take place. If you want to provide them healthcare, I'll be glad to, talk about self-determination.
I remember having one of those conversations till 2 a.m, like more than a year ago. I remember it when we were still traveling to events. And the thing that struck me is what one of those conservative thinkers expressed as something that was true. And it was at best a partial truth, and at worst was really a belief that had no basis in truth. And that's the tough part, isn't it?
It is tough the part. People can't tell whether I'm a Trump supporter or not a Trump supporter from time to time when I am talking in a neutral setting. They'll hear that I don't agree with several needs of mine that are not met by his narrative. Several, especially the ones called inclusion, equity, and the honoring of diversity, which is a hot topic in the business world, by the way. It's a DE&I training: diversity, equity, inclusion. That there's a whole marketplace. There's several consulting companies that come into companies and help them with that piece. Well, what those companies are doing is helping these people with their belief and bias mindsets, trying to extract the fallacies that are running inside the person's consciousness so that the company can be one that allows these different points of views and then gets back to what the company is supposed to do. Because if these equities aren't dealt with, talent leaves the company. Talent, whatever colored skin they are, what gender they are, they're going, screw this, I'm leaving this company. I'm thinking about one executive I'm helping with a transition right now. She's going like, this is not my journey. Where they're going, I am not going there. I'm going like, oh my gosh, this organization has just lost their primary talent, historical talent. They're not handing the ship off that they've been steering very well because they've got mutiny on the ship. They're going like, why am I on a ship with mutiny? I could take a rowboat over to this other ship over here and go like, I'm good. Next port, anytime I can get the handoff to take place, I'm gone. And the organization doesn't even know it. They're not even seeing that that's what's taking place. They're going like, they're not dealing with a collaborative, cooperative experience. You got, a really basically about 3 out of about, 20 people about 20 people trying to get the ship to steal over here. And they're going like, there's rocks over there. and the captain knows it and saying, wait a minute, no, keep it over here. It's like, no, sorry. Anyway, the fossilization of belief has to do with, I believe my way is right. I believe that this is the best course of things. I am going to do this as an authoritarian or as the head chief. I'm not interested in the wreckage that takes place after I leave. That is up to them. I'm just going to, this is the easiest way my belief structure works. And meanwhile, and this is one of the things that we need to tell a story that leads us to freedom. We need to tell a story that leads us to collaboration and cooperation as a unified nation. All of us, numerically, California is one of the top 3 revenue generators in the world. California is. And there's a good reason why it is. There's a good reason why Germany has been successful for a lot of years and Japan has been successful for a lot of years, because when at the end of World War II, they were rebuilt in a way to have a healthy relationship between social values and capitalist values. Doesn't mean they don't have problems. Doesn't mean that there are not specific challenges or battles between those different things. It doesn't mean the old belief structures of Japanese culture and German culture from World War II aren't trying to rear their ugly heads back up again, because they are. That's called scary honesty. And it doesn't mean that our problems from the Civil War have went away. They really haven't. Seems like the fossilization of beliefs. I used to, one might say, in the South, I used to feel proud driving by the statue of name the general from the South. I used to feel proud because when I was in school, I was taught this belief about that person. I was taught about the sacrifice, the loss, how his family lost the farm, how, after the North won, this is what happened. And he came back in his house and his farm was destroyed. Well, I can empathize with that pain. The only missing part of that equation is that slaves happen to be involved in the process of that wealth and that system. And yeah, that's what was available to them in their belief structure back there. But it's not like we're not doing that to other countries right now. There are people in other countries working slave labor to make t-shirts for our country. I'm just going to just shrug my shoulders and, well, why don't we talk about that humanity that's suffering? And the answer is that country it's not ours. It's over there. We don't have to talk about the difficult issues of equity, inclusion, diversity. We don't have to talk about that because it's over there. It's a t-shirt. We import it. It's that country's problem.
Okay, well, that's a very complicated build. Now I went from problems speaking to our fellow citizens to problems internationally dealing with other countries and equity, and our issues as a people get very complex.
The visionary part of me that takes us to the bigger picture can also come back into the specific moment, Tom, is like, we need to have a healthy discussion about healing and restoration with people that don't agree with us and that are fossilized in their belief structure. We have to have a healthier way to do that. And regrettably, our adversarial nature in the media and between each other doesn't allow us to sit at the same table and saying, I think this value is this way. And I think this value is this way. And actually having a healthy discussion is that, and what would it be like if post-election Biden by himself has a discussion with the top 20 remaining Republican leaders in a roundtable? Okay, you guys, we've got to do something because we've got to work together as a nation and televise it. Do you think 10 Republicans will show up in the room with Biden by himself? Televised.
Sure they would.
No, they won't.
They won't show up for that?
No
that
way.
Free media?
No way.
He'll
They're
invite
terrified.
them and they'll just snub him?
They will not go.
Oh, wow.
That's where we are.
Disappointing. That'd be very
That's the scary honesty. Your liberal, optimistic self.
Yeah. Hopeful self, right?
You were so helpful there. I go, they ain't showing. They ain't showing. They'd rather nitpick and work on the margins and try to keep the narrative that they've been fostering in place, because they don't want to be known as another Lincoln Project. They don't want to be known as a collaborative body. Now, the people from the Lincoln Project will get in the room with Biden and have that discussion.
So who would you have show up? Mitt Romney maybe would show up because he sees a path forward. But
that's it. It's a discussion with him and Mitt. That's it. That's all. That's it.
This
just the only one that's going to show.
This just eliminates that the administration needs Bill Stierle to help mediate.
I'm banging my head here, Tom. Banging my head. But it is facilitatable. I would be glad to facilitate that discussion. It is facilitatable. It is something to do it, and a newscaster can't get there because they can't really facilitate it. They're only they can shoot it. The newscaster can give comments on it after. I'll be glad to take care of that. But I'd be happy to facilitate, and it doesn't have to be 10. It can be 5. It can be Mitt and 4 other people that want to move back to the center and see if they can salvage and restore the Republican Party back to respect and integrity and things like that. You got a shot at it with that group.
It seems to me that if the Republicans that are left in the wake of this election do not come to the table and work together with the Democrats that are there, then the Democrats are going to be pushed more into a place of extreme behavior and choices they make, like eliminating the filibuster so they can get things done, and things like this that are just going to move us further apart.
Yeah. Well, the action that's going to take place, and this is actually the needed action that's going to take place, is that the squabbling and the infighting and the stuff that's happening at the federal level, people will stop watching it. And actually what needs to be watched is what actually is going to take place at the local level. And the Democrats, if they just win at the local level and just keep moving at the local level, and build collaboration and cooperation at the local level and start voting on things that are in the best interest of the community with growth and business development, or we want to keep our town very main street versus Wall Street. And then, what do you do with the big box stores, and what do you do with these things and stuff? And the dance between Main Street and Wall Street is that narrative at the local level. You got a shot at. Everybody's looking at the answer coming from above, but it really needs to actually come from the grassroots up. So the foothold that has taken place with Black Lives Matter is going to be really valuable for police reform and justice reform. Okay, so those are the 2 that they stay with. But there's other things that Black Lives Matter can't and doesn't have the bandwidth to handle. It can't be done under that brand. If they do those 2 things well, things will go better for all of us. But what about wage equality? Oh, yeah, that thing. So there's got to be some form of restoration around that.
Well, and there's going to be some sort of respiration, talk about equity in terms of, taxation, and making that a little more proportional instead of, these big tax cuts for the wealthy who really don't need it. And that's hurt our, budget deficit, among many other things.
Right.
There's gonna need to be a whole discussion about that too.
And that's a whole economy too. That's a whole economy that there's, and I've talked about these economies before. I mean, what is the economy of healthcare? It occupies 1/6 of our economy, and you're trying to rewrite it. And the 1/6 of the economy that doesn't want to be rewrite wants to take apart the Obamacare piece, which is saying, listen, 1/6 of this economy is not healthy for us. and it's not healthy for the citizens. So the government says we need to swoop in and do something about this part of the economy that's really crippling us. And it's affecting other parts of the economy. Well, what parts? What parts of the economy? Well, it affects real estate. If healthcare is taken care of in a different way, people will buy better houses and they'll remodel things.
Well, and interestingly, as you say that, it occurs to me that I think the current president really focuses far too much on the economy of real estate in some ways.
Right.
And doesn't pay attention to other things. And I think it's why there's never really been a comprehensive plan put out by the White House for what to do to replace Obamacare if you really feel it's that bad.
That's right. That's right. Let's pick up our next episode on fossilization, part 2. And I think that we can take a look at how different parts of our economy has been fossilized with certain beliefs that makes it a little difficult for us to reimagine a different part of the economy. The one that I'd really like to break free is the energizing of entrepreneurialism and see if we can get that out of a fossilization place, because it really needs this next level of imagination, because that's really kind of a little bit more of the path forward. We need to provide support to people think and develop new businesses in order to reimagine and reinvigorate new products, new services, and these kinds of things. In order to really leave us with an optimistic place, there is a way to chip away and discover, here's the bones of what's been fossilized and what can we recultivate out of this. It's sort of like, if we want to really have a little bit of fun with this, it's like, okay, we found some mammoth's DNA. How do we really want to bring a mammoth back or not? And the answer might be, you know what? Yeah. Actually, one of those systems might be things. What would be an example of a mammoth that I would like to come back? Is I would like the antitrust laws to come back and be applied. I would like to regrow that mammoth, because then all of a sudden, some of these big systems will not be able to take advantage of the entire system.
I got one too that is sorely needed, and a mammoth of infrastructure.
Great example of a mammoth we need to bring back alive. Great example.
Which can put so many people to work and meet everybody's needs for bridges and roads and even our energy. I mean, there's so many things.
There's a lot of Main Street and Wall Street stuff that can go back and forth there. And there's ways to position it that way so that people don't gobble up, the big contracts and not let anybody take advantage. But again, that's you and I setting the intention and the bigger intention, to move things forward. Anyway.
Yep. Okay.
All right. Thanks, Tom. The great discussion.
I appreciate it. Look forward to part 2 of fossilization.
All right. Take care. Bye.
Thank you for listening to this Purchasing Truth podcast. We trust that you have enjoyed this engaging and thought-provoking conversation. Our hope is that you've received value, found clarity, and broadened your truth perspective in this episode. If you did, leave us a review or visit our website, purchasingtruth.com. Join us again for another informative and content-rich discussion here at the Purchasing Truth podcast. Don't just accept whatever information comes your way. Join the discussion. Discover your own voice. Purchase your own truth.